Thanks very much, Richard. Thanks for the welcome, and welcome everyone. Just saying to Richard that today's a very momentous day down in here in Melbourne. For those that know me know that I'm a very keen golfer, and I can see Wendy nodding her head there. And golf is open again today. So following this presentation, I will admit that I will be visiting the golf course. I'm very much looking forward to it. So, but no, in all seriousness, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today. And I'm especially excited to pair up with Michelle. Michelle and I have been doing quite a bit of work together, and really looking forward to hopefully giving you some tips. When Michelle and I were discussing the seminar, we really were giving some thought as to what would be relevant to talk to people about, talking to our members about today, and we sort of cottoned onto the fact of that it's really important at the moment around principles of leadership, resilience, really important. In how we project ourselves and our businesses, and I suppose, you know, with our families and the community. So what I'm going to do shortly is just share some tips around, I suppose, leadership and also managing employee relations, and then Michelle will lead into, and she's the star of the show, but she'll lead into talking a bit more about resilience and so forth. So without further ado, I'll just make sure I get the technology right here, and I'll just share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see that okay. Hopefully get the slideshow. Okay, so yeah, so what I just really wanted to share today was just some ideas that, and I suppose I've done a little bit of research around this, around, I suppose, leadership principles and employee relations during COVID. So first port of call is 7 leadership principles for managing during the COVID situation. And they're actually 7 C's. So I'll just run through each one of these and just with some comments. The first principle is to be calm. And I suppose the theory is we need to project a sense of calm, not only with our employees, but also our customers and suppliers. People are looking to us as leaders to be calm, and particularly display that calm through what has been, you know, what is and has been very difficult in certain times. Not easy to achieve all the time when there's lots of crises and things to deal with, but certainly a very important principle. The second C is confidence. And this is an interesting one, but basically, again, people are looking to us to be confident and project confidence, and probably more a confidence around we can get through this. We can get through this together. And as leaders, that's quite difficult, again, but because, you know, we do have to display that confidence in what are very trying times. But really what we're trying to do is, I suppose, by portraying that confidence, is what we're about is minimising the amount of hurt and inconvenience to all our stakeholders, so that people are seeing that there is a way forward. Thirdly, communication, and I suppose I think this is probably the most important, one of the most important. Relentless communication is really important in these times, and I know here at Coraggio, we have been very active in communicating with our members and our stakeholders. Regular updates, very important. Do not delay communicating any decisions and priorities. It's very important once you've got some news, once there's something going, that you get that communication piece out to your people, whether that be on an individual basis or a group basis. It really doesn't matter. It must be done very quickly and as soon as something hits. And really, the reason for that is silence. Silence will fuel the rumour mill. So people have got a lot of time on their hands at the moment. Yes, they're working and so forth, but they've got a bit of think time, and if there's silence coming from leaders, then that does fuel the rumour mill, which is not good for anyone. Fourthly, collaboration. No one expects us to have all the answers when we've got these sort of situations going on. So the key thing here is to engage your team, get their input and get their thoughts about dealing with a difficult situation or a particular problem that you've encountered. Encourage them to provide their views. Really important to encourage people to collaborate and provide their views and ideas. Another thought pattern on this one is potentially, possibly establish some working groups. Some working groups to look at a particular problem, a particular issue, to come back to the group, to come back to you with some ideas about how to tackle that problem. So collaboration is really important, and really important in terms of getting people engaged and helping out each other. Fifthly, community. Really important too. Again, it's about reinforcing, I think, with our people, with our suppliers, that we're all in this together. We're a community. And we're trying to contribute to the greater group, group of the community. We need to portray community in our behaviour. Everything we're doing is about community, and it's really important to talk about this, particularly with the impact of the virus that is having on our community, our businesses, our families, etc. That community spirit must come through in any sort of leadership. Number 6 is compassion. Compassion, again, is very important, particularly in these times. Everyone is being impacted by COVID, and everyone's been impacted by the current situation we're all in with lockdowns, etc. There's many people out there, including ourselves, that are doing it tough at the moment. And people's resilience is being tested, especially from a personal or family point of view, because of the things that we're facing COVID. So we've got to be considerate of that. We've got to demonstrate some compassion. We've got to give people that are having sort of family issues or problems, we need to give them a little bit of space. And that could be a little bit of time off, maybe some part-time hours, things like that. We need to just demonstrate some compassion. And compassion in a time of crisis is a really important part of leadership. It's very important. And finally, cash. Leadership in terms of the cash. As we all know, the old famous saying, and I certainly hear my board members hear me say it all the time, cash is king, and cash is really king, particularly in a crisis. So what does that mean? Basically, in any decisions we're making around our business, we need to consider both the short-term and the long-term financial health of the business and making any decisions in this current day. Your employees will generally be worried about how's the business going, is my job safe? So they're also looking to you to be very prudent, probably in spending, and expecting to be prudent in spending. So we're building up cash reserves to get through these bad times. So they're probably more than anything wanting to conserve cash or expecting you to conserve cash to make sure that we get through. So that's a really important. So there are the 4 C's that sort of come through with regards to leadership. And I think each one of those is equally as important as the other. But I think, and I'm not sure what everyone feels, and we'll probably talk about this afterwards in the Q&A, but if I look at that list down there, I think the 2 most important ones at the moment from my point of view would be communication and probably compassion, on the basis that everyone's doing it tough. So let's move on now, and I just want to talk about employee relationships. But before I do, just to round off the leadership theme, this is a quote that I really think is pretty important, and I think most of us really understand this, and something we demonstrate, I think, very much in Coraggio. And that is, the key to successful leadership is influence, not authority. And I think those 7 C's that I've just talked about, they really are all behaviours around influence and influencing people in terms of leadership, not banging the desk and getting people to do what you want them to do. Very important, I believe, in these current days. Okay, let's move on to managing employees. And I must admit, there will be a little bit of overlap here, so just bear with me. But just some tips for managing our employees and the employee relationships and relations during COVID. The first one, and very important, is we must stay true to our values. We must stay true to our values, our beliefs, the culture that we've developed within our businesses. In these current circumstances, those values will be tested. There's a lot of stuff going on that we have to deal with, a lot of curveballs. I know down here in Victoria, just with lockdowns and things happening and changes all the time, you're tested when it comes to sticking to what your values and your cultures and your beliefs are. We must ensure that we're sticking to our values, both internally, but also externally with those stakeholders, those suppliers, etc., and customers, as well as within our business. And the other thing that's really interesting probably around this is the way we behave in these current circumstances. The way we behave now will be remembered by our employees and other stakeholders for years to come. People will remember that we've stuck true to our values and we've got through this, and that will be a big plus with developing those relationships and maintaining those relationships in the future. Communication. I won't go on to this too much because I did talk about it before, but keep communication open. A couple of key things. We need to be upfront. We need to be upfront and honest about what's going on. We need to provide clarity and consistency. We need to be very clear about what we're communicating. It must be two-way. We must allow feedback to come back to us, as well as we're giving feedback, we're getting feedback the other way. And we must promote that engagement and buy-in from our employees when we are communicating with them. Very, very important. Number 3, we need to embrace our responsibility to employees. And where this is sort of coming around is, with the conditions we're dealing with at the moment, unfortunately, it's a harsh and probably distressing consequence that we may have to let some people go within our business or stand them down, whatever the case may be. And that's a very difficult situation for everyone, a difficult situation for us as business leaders, but also obviously a difficult situation for employees. So just thinking about that leadership trait of compassion, this is where the compassion thing comes in. People will be shocked that they maybe had to be let go or stood down. And what we need to do is we need to provide them with some assistance. We need to maintain contact with them. We need to offer them some ideas of what they could be doing. And we need to offer them compassion. So it's really, really important to embrace that responsibility. And again, that will rub off your behaviour and your beliefs and your culture and your values. That will rub off in terms of the future, again, with your future, with your employees, etc. Number 4, I think this is also very important. Well, they're all important, but where we have a success, we need to celebrate it. Now, there's a lot of negativity around with COVID at the moment. So anything that anyone has, we need to celebrate their success. I've just shared a success with you today. I'm going to finally have a game of golf for a long time. That to me is success. I've shared that with my board this morning on our WhatsApp group. Everyone's come back to me, have a great game, Campbell, really enjoy it, tell me how you got on. So really simple stuff. But we reach out to all our staff and we encourage them to share their successes with us. And when we get those successes, we communicate them out there. And we might offer them a little small reward or send them a hamper or something to celebrate that. But that will have a real impact in terms of team morale, number 1, and also staff engagement. Very, very important to celebrate success when there's not a lot around at the moment. And finally, and this sort of really leads into Michelle's session, but we need to double down on our health and wellbeing. Now, on ours and our team's health and wellbeing. It's not just our health and wellbeing, it's our teams, it's everyone around us. Basically, we're all generally working remotely at the moment, and there's this lack of face-to-face contact, and that has an impact on all of us, and it's a hard one to deal with. So what we need to do as leaders and employers is we need to step up and we need to support our team's health and wellbeing, whatever that might be. A lot of it's around providing just emotional support, just being available to talk and reach out. We must have regular checkups. We must be checking in with our teams when we're working remotely, particularly to see how they're doing. And talking through how things are going at home. Is there anything we can do to help you? Really, really being compassionate again as to where things are at. So that's a really, really important one as we navigate these difficult times we're in now. So that's basically it from me. Just a few things there, just around leadership and employee relations. So I hope you got some value out of that, and I'll hand back to Richard. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Campbell. Thanks very much. And yeah, certainly from all of us, we wish you a great golf game. We hope you don't lose too many golf balls, but thank you so much. That was actually really good. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to our second speaker for this afternoon. And I'd like to introduce you, we're going from Melbourne to Queensland now, to Michelle Lagana, who's one of our Queensland chairs. And Michelle Lagana, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Richard. Can everyone see the screen? Thumbs up.
Yep.
Thanks, Campbell. So it was interesting when I was preparing for this new buzzword of resilience. I looked at the Oxford English definition. So resilience is the ability of people to recover quickly after something unpleasant. Well, you think? I think the COVID thing has been very unpleasant. So we are going through a very disruptive period for all of us. As Campbell said, we're all in this together. So we can either pivot and improve our circumstances and take on the challenges and find the silver lining, or we can freeze and fail. So the difference between whether you come out of it in a positive light or potentially a not so positive light, they say is resilient. So what does that even mean? The reality is that resilience doesn't discriminate. I don't think any of us here today hasn't suffered. Suffering is a part of the human condition. We've had financial stress. You may have had tragedy or loss. You may have had an unwell child, maybe a miscarriage, a death, a health setback. I mean, the reality is that shit happens and we just have to roll with the dices. So it's really not what happens to you, it's how you deal with it, because that's the difference between the level of resiliency that you may have. So what does that even mean? Well, these resilient practices are divided into these 8 sectors, and I will pull on Campbell's C alliteration thread and use the word centered. So whether it's your personal life, your personal life in terms of exercising, your health and well-being, your social connections, what are you doing across those areas to make sure, and they're all interconnected and they're all cross-pollinated in your life, because typically if your marriage isn't going so well, or work's not going so well, or your health is failing, or you have an unwell child, or you're having to homeschool, there's a knock-on domino effect, and it impacts all the areas in your life. So this interconnectivity, to recognize it, is really important, because it's sort of almost a sink or swim situation. Okay, so what does that even mean? So for me I thought about this and I thought, okay, well, what value can I bring to this group in terms of understanding their resilience? I mean, I didn't know how resilient I was, and I did some research, and I thought we could benchmark it. And if you've got a pen and paper or a post-it note, I want you to think first, because we're going to start with the end in mind. And I want you to think first about what's your end game. You're all entrepreneurs, successful business leaders. You've got a plan, and he who fails to plan plans to fail, he or she. So what is your end game? And I just want you to take a second to think about it. Here's some examples. Are you looking for an amalgamation or an acquisition? Are you setting yourself up, for someone to knock on your door to sell your business for X amount of dollars within 3, 5, 10 years? Are you simply just buying yourself a job, clip the ticket, and then you're going to turn off the lights? Do you want to leave a legacy? Do you want to leave, this is part of, you wanting to leave a legacy for future generations, or maybe it's succession planning for your children. Maybe you want to morph your business into a franchise model. Or I put this in for you, Campbell, maybe you want to retire and work on your golf handicap. So I want you all just to think about what is your end game. And the reason why I want you to think about that is because there's 3 levels in your life that is impacted by resilience, and all the decisions we make fall under these 3 levels. It's either your health, well-being, longevity, whether you're spiritual, whether you're compassionate, as Campbell alluded to, your finances, investing money. Again, that impacts your end game. When can you retire? Do you have enough to retire? And your personal and professional relationships. So how resilient really are you? So I thought, we'll just take a bit of a test. So only take 2 minutes. We've done EQ tests, we've done IQ tests. I know I have, but I've never done a resilient test. So I thought, how many of us have really actually tested and benchmark how resilient we really are? So therefore, we can look at our end game and as a baseline and work out, well, do we need to increase our resilient levels, or are actually tracking pretty well in terms of being resilient? So if you've got a pen and a paper, I'd like to take a really, really quick test. It'll only take 2 minutes. And that'll set the platform to moving forward for our discussion. So number 1 is strongly agree and disagree, sorry. And number 5 is you strongly agree. So here's the questions, pen and paper. 1 for strongly disagree, 5 to agree. In a difficult situation, I turn to what can be done to put things right. Strongly disagree with that, or you strongly agree, or somewhere in between. I influence where I can, rather than worrying about what I can't influence. Influence where you can, or you just worry about what you can't influence. Strongly disagree, a 3, maybe, sometimes, or strongly agree with a 5. I don't take criticism personally. Now, be honest, I take criticism personally. So let's be really honest, because the results are yours and no one's going to see your results. I'm not going to ask you for your results, so be honest. I generally manage to keep things in perspective. Okay, keep it in perspective. Do you worry about the things you can't worry about? Do you control the things you can in your life? Do you kind of keep a level head? Or do you panic and worry about things that are beyond your control? Okay, next one. I am calm in a crisis. Now, crisis is a different definition to everyone. I'm good at finding solutions to solve problems. Can you find the solutions to problems, or do you have to turn someone else, or you're not very good at it? 1 for strongly disagree, 5 for strongly agree, or somewhere in between. I wouldn't describe myself as an anxious person. When Richard calls me, I get anxious. So I reckon I'm about a 3. So be honest, again, they're your results. I don't tend to avoid conflict. Okay, do you create drama in your life? You avoid contact, or you look at it down the, see the light of the day and look it down the track to address it head on. Okay, finally, I try to control events rather than being a victim of circumstances. It's a big one. I trust my intuition. You go with your gut feel, you trust your feeling, you sort of call for others for advice. What are you, a 1 or a 5? I manage my stress levels well. Campbell's going to do that this afternoon on the green. I feel confident and secure in my position. Right, that's it. Okay, do a quick tally. I'm not going to ask you what your tally is, but here's the results. Now, I'm assuming that if you are above a 43, you can probably base your benchmark against your end game and think you've pretty much got this under control. If you're under a 43, it's okay. And why is it okay? Because resilience not genetic. I mean, there might be some impacts over your life, nature, nurture, lifestyle, nutritional things, dietary related factors. There might be circumstances in your life that makes you sort of panic or worry about things or challenge assumptions differently because of your upbringing. But typically the scientists say that research has proven that resilience can be learned. So this is great, because if it can be learned, then you can improve your resilience zone. You can improve the way you handle these areas. So we're using this benchmark to explore and adopt ways to improve your resilience. Has everyone been able to add up their scores and see where they fit in these 4 criteria? These slides will be on your member-only portal. Okay, so let's see what that means. Okay, so you know what your end game is. You've worked out your resilience level, probably possibly something you've never done before. Maybe you have. You can benchmark where your resilience scores are at and maybe whether it needs a little bit of work, or maybe you're actually sitting okay. But regardless, because it's not genetic, because you can work on your resilience zone, let's talk about what resilient people and the quality that resilient people's harness are different to people who may be below a 43 and a little less resilient. So again, are your levels resilience adequate for that end game that you talked about in your journey? Or are there areas that you need to work on? I'm just stalling in case you're still adding up. I'm no good at math. Okay, so let's have a look. what are the key characteristics to building your resilience? Right. Resilient people create their own vision of success. So they choose their attention and they focus on the things they need to do more of more and the things they need to do less. It's just a natural ability for someone who's got resilience. So they can appraise a situation, they can assess what they can change, and they try and salvage the negative in a positive situation, like Campbell playing golf this afternoon. So problematic situations are things that they typically can handle. Is that you? Right. Secondly, resilient people tend to typically just have a high self-esteem and a positive outlook. That could be a nature-nurture thing depending on your upbringing. But they've got an ability to dial up or amp up the good rather than being negative, glass half full and dragging the anchor. So they're hardwired to actually recognize the threats and the weaknesses and the great, which is great from an evolutionary perspective. If you're being, chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you know when to run. But feeling overwhelming with problems is something you may need to work on. Psychologists call this agglomeration, where you haven't got the ability to break down the problems. So ask yourself, is my self-esteem where it needs to be? Do I need to dial up the positivity? Do I need to think glass half full, not glass empty, as resilient people typically do? Resilient people tune into gratitude. Some people keep a gratitude diary and they wake up every morning and say what they're grateful for. I mean, at the end of the day, Campbell's grateful that he's playing golf. But, we in Australia do have a lot to be grateful for. There's always someone better off. There's always someone worse off. It's a very powerful resource if you can be objective about your life. And if you can think about not the negative, but the positive things. Maybe your children are well, even though you're homeschooling. The fact that you have a sense of community and belonging and people to turn to encourage you as we're doing today. And as Campbell alluded to, that community spirit, some business owners don't have that. So optimism is really important. And ask yourself, are you typically an optimistic person or are you typically negative? And that's okay, because again, resilience is not genetic, it can be learned. So it's about managing your stress and boosting your resilience. So some examples in a research paper I looked at last night for this session. Do you display hostility? Are you naturally hostile? Do you hide your feelings? Are you unable to listen properly? Are you being a perfectionist? Because life's not perfect. In fact, the beautiful things in life are the imperfections. Are you having difficulty, or is it you finding it challenging to relax? Do you need to do some meditation? And generally, are you being critical of others? Campbell mentioned compassion. So these are the quality traits about not being grateful and not having gratitude. So perhaps that's something you may need to work on, or maybe you don't. So something to think about. How else can you widen your resilient zone? Right. Resilient people typically are really good at managing stress. So if you don't manage stress, it can become a tipping point. And what is stress? Stress is unique to you. You might find stress burning the dinner, not homeschooling your kids, not being able to go to your Coraggio advisory board meeting face to face and having that social interaction. Maybe stress is the fact that you can't get out of the house or get on the green or whatever that means to you. So research proves that believing that you have the power to withstand events outside of your control can give you the ability to overcome with adversity and diversity. So it's really important, if you're going to improve or amp your resilience capability or your resilience zone, is ask yourself, am I really managing stress as well as I can? Resilient people embrace the opportunity to step out of their comfort zone. I go into the library all the time. I love the library. And I go to the same section. It's usually self-help, but that's another webinar. But, they say, go somewhere different. Try something different. Step out your comfort zone. Think outside the square. Think outside the box. Think about the things that you can do to actually upskill, learn new skills, and experience new life lessons. It's amazing when you explore new opportunities, how it could be the saving grace to do all those things we've talked about, reducing your stress, having more confidence, and just overall generally being more resilient. And finally, because I'm cognizant of the time, resilient people have a sense of purpose. We talked about when we're talking about your end game, if you have a legacy, you know, is it succession planning? Are you planning a future for your retirement? Do you actually want to make a difference in this world? You know, they say you live on in the memories of those you've touched. If you're at your eulogy and a fly on the wall, what are they saying about you when you pass? And death and taxes, the two things we can't avoid. Do you have a sense of purpose? Are you doing what you want to do day to day? Are you living your dream? Are you waking up in the morning, being grateful, having gratitude, showing compassion, looking at the glass half full, being optimistic, and doing all of those things that naturally resilient people have either learned or typically because of their upbringing they've grown. So this sense of purpose, like being part of the Karajian community, really is important to people. They've got someone to turn to, whether it be the chair like Campbell, whether it be Richard, whether it be their fellow members. But knowing that you've got a sense of community moving forward is really important to help increase the level of your resilience zone in life moving forward, particularly during a pandemic. It's times in adversity when we realize that having that sense of community really, you know, is there to sort of, you know, we've got you back. It's a support system and we're there for you. And that's what these webinars are all about, connectivity. And we want to connect with you and we want to make your life better and we want you to succeed. But more important, moving forward, we want you to think about your end game. So starting with the end in mind, do you have what it takes based on your results to move forward, to be where you want to be in your life? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you can learn. You can find people, resources, places to increase your resilience zone. You all have it in you. It's just a matter of wanting to do it. So that's that's it from me, Campbell. Back over to you. And I think we're allowed to throw to the floor, Richard, in terms of questions, and I'll stop screen sharing.
Thank you, Michelle. That was fantastic. And thank you, Campbell. Is there any questions from the floor, please?
They're all thinking about playing golf.
No, it's usually Donovan's the first one to jump up with a question.
I think I'd ask Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. That was very, very good. Made everyone think and do some maths at the same time, which is always challenging. I'd like to compliment you on your hairdo. Some of us can't actually go out and actually attend to such things, but obviously you can. How resilient are you, Michelle? Where did you rate yourself in all that, and what have you done to maybe change things given your presentation?
Right now I've done nothing because I did this last night. So I actually, you know, to be honest with you, Donovan, and to be completely honest with all of you, I mean, I thought I was pretty resilient. You know, my friends call me a ball breaker, but maybe they're not my friends actually now. But at the end of the day, I did do the test because I didn't want it to be a waste of your time. Time's the one commodity man can't buy, as Winston Churchill says. And actually, I was in the second low category. So it's interesting you should raise that, Donovan. And I don't know if anyone else wants to share that they had a surprising result, but I'm not as resilient as I thought I was, but I think I'm super sensitive. So it's a good point. You know, he or she who knows their weaknesses has no weaknesses. So I need to work on toughening up, obviously. And because resilience isn't genetic, I am going to move forward and work on my faults, if you like, and I'm happy to do so. What was your result? Quid pro quo, Donovan?
Well, I'm still on another. I'm still on. I got 46.
Okay, now you're just showing off.
But one of my fellow Karajians got 54, so he trumped me.
Okay, well, it's not a competition. It's all about it's.
I said he was self-deluded, but I don't think he necessarily agrees with that.
Did anyone else want to share their results, or more, not share your result, but did anyone else get some cathartic surprises from their results like I did?
Hey, Michelle, this is Kevin. Who said it's not a competition?
Kevin, that's why you're a shareholder. Rebecca, did you have a surprising result on your scores? I'll just throw you out there now.
Yeah, sure. My score was 44, which surprised me given how I've really not enjoyed lockdown. So I would have thought it was a lot weaker, but I think in big picture, yeah, 44, I was pretty pleased with that.
Well, the irony is not lost on me that the higher the score, the better in this case. But in a handicap, right, Campbell, you want the lower score. What about you, Wendy? How did you fare?
I don't mean to be immodest, but you did ask. I got a 48. Resilience has been one of those things that I've actually honed a lot in over my career. In fact, I actually talk in terms of grit, which is really just kind of resilience applied over time. And grit is the #1 determiner of high performance. It's not where you went to school. It's not how much money you have in the bank. It's not what your parents did. It's really around your grit, your determination to see something through to an outcome. So this is today's topic is actually one of my personal topics. I love the 7 C's. I've sailed across most of the seas, but anyway, that's another story for another webinar. But no, the resilience, yeah, no, well done, great presentations for both of you. Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy. Anyone else got any other questions, comments, feedback, or would like to share any insights?
Wendy, can I just say, you're the second person that's mentioned the word grit in the last week. We had a guest speaker last Friday in Brisbane, David O'Brien, who I spoke to this morning, and he mentioned the word grit in his presentation. And I've actually said to our marketing team since that, I think one of our thought leadership articles that's coming out between now and Christmas will be around the word grit. And it was a really interesting story that David, our guest speaker last Friday, spoke about, where he said he was a country boy from northern New South Wales, moved to Brisbane, didn't know anybody, and had to build his network, had to build a career, had to get involved in all the things that you do. And as he reflected now, 25 years later, and somebody said to him, what was the thing that, got you there or got you through all that? And he used the word grit. And it was interesting to hear your definition of the word grit, because I think we often talk about the word resilience, but we don't talk about the word grit. And I've sort of kept it in my diary since hearing David say that last Friday. And I think that word there is what's got a lot of people through what really in our generation we've never seen, or this generation has been a generation that never experienced a world war. And we've had to experience this really over the last 2 years, which has been unique because a lot of us were born into an environment where life was pretty good. And all of a sudden for the last 2 years, it's been we're not used to. So it's taken words like, suddenly we're talking about the words resilient and or grit. So it's interesting now that you've brought up the word today. So that's the second time I've heard it. So
clearly we're very intelligent people. No, anyway. but one of the things they talk about is because like human nature, the adrenaline kicks in, you deal with the problem solve, and the adrenaline levels go back down again. But the problem is with COVID, a lot of the problems, they're unrelenting, they're every day. And that's where you kind of go, well, you need that grit to see you through, because you can be resilient for a day. And it's how, as the definition, Michelle, how quickly you bounce back from a setback. But, we're getting setbacks every day, and especially for some of the smaller businesses. I think if you're in government or very large corporates, I think that they've weathered COVID very well. It's the people that have been a little bit closer to the coalface where they've actually had to dig deep. So, yeah, grit.
Richard, if you're looking for book recommendations, you've got Angela Duckworth. Her book was on grit. So I don't know if that's something that we can look at for our membership. That's a great book.
Okay, we'll look that up. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, because I actually mentioned it to our marketing team earlier in the week that we'd love to do a thought leadership article on that exact word. So thank you. Over to you, Campbell. Oh, sorry, Kevin, over to you. Oh, you're just putting your hand up, Kevin. So I thought you wanted to ask a question.
I'm mute.
So I just wanted to take a moment. We had a lady here who dialed in. I just want to see if she's still on screen. Maybe not. Sorry. I just wanted to say a special welcome to Tanya McPhee. Ladies and gentlemen, you may not know Tanya. Tanya's one of our newest one of our new members coming into our Victorian board. So a big welcome to you, Tanya. I just saw you on the databases in the last 24 hours.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Very excited about a year ahead, really.
Yeah. So I think, I'm not sure, I think we've met your husband in Melbourne pre-COVID. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there that day. And I said, can you please go in my place? So yeah, he was very impressed.
Yeah. No, thank you. For those of you dialing in from Victoria today, fingers crossed, the advice that we've had is we think that October will be our last Zoom meetings and that Melbourne will be running live on the 12th of November. You may not have heard that in the press, but we hear things internally, maybe a bit before the press. So our facility, I know the chairs are well aware of that, but we will be running live back at our facility at 365 Burke Street on the 12th of November. And the chairs will look forward to be back there. And we've got a great guest speaker lined up. And hopefully myself and the marketing team will be back in Melbourne. I know Gladys is working very hard to open up the borders between Sydney and Melbourne. So we look forward to all being back on the 12th of November. Sorry, back to you, Campbell. My apologies.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I just wanted to ask, I suppose, a question from my point of view, just running through those 7 Cs. I mentioned the word collaboration, and I was talking about collaboration mainly, and I probably in this forum, just with our employees or even our suppliers and customers. What are people doing to, for want of a better word, collaborate more with those people? Because it is really important at the moment. I'm just really interested in see what people are doing. Just some tips. Have I got thoughts?
What are you doing, Tanya? Let's start with our newest member.
Gosh, talk about putting me on the spot, Richard, but that's okay. A number of things. More recently, I am sort of, I guess, pushing things back to the team and saying, can you guys work amongst each other and work out a solution? It's a big learning curve for me. I used to sort of get involved and try and come up with a solution myself. So it's all about, the team coming up with different ideas. Also, most of the team send me a weekly report every Friday, and they have suggestions there on how they're feeling, what they're hearing in the market, what training they need. So I sort of listen to what they're saying and come back to them. And every morning at 9:30, we have a daily huddle. And that's where we all come together for a maximum of sort of 10, 15 minutes and let each other know what's going on, what we need to know, how we fix a root cause of a problem that might have happened the day before, et cetera, et cetera. So we do a lot of things to sort of all collaborate together. I've got a great team. And also we have Zoom drinks sometimes, nice glass of wine or whatever is in the glass to all get together, because I think it's important to look after each other as well. Enough from me. I hope that helps.
Hi, Tanya. This is Kevin Ryan. Forgive me, Richard, just for butting in. But did you say your team has a morning cuddle?
No, huddle. Not a cuddle. It's a virtual cuddle. It's a huddle, HUDDLE.
Okay.
So we do that on Teams. It works very, very well.
Okay.
Yeah, I must admit, Tanya, that with my Coraggio board, we sort of have a weekly huddle, not a cuddle, Kevin, a weekly huddle. And just, it's just great to get together and find out what everyone's up to, how the weekend's been, and just try and stay together essentially. So I think that's really, really important. So, yeah. Has anyone else got anything they want to share?
Thanks, Campbell. I just want to go over to Scott Bryant. Are you there, Scott? How are you, mate? Scott,
I'll just unmute. Yes, Richard, I'm here.
Thank you. Scott, for everybody's benefit, is one of our board members in Sydney that's been a part of Coraggio for how long, Scott?
10 years, according to LinkedIn.
Wow, 10 years. So welcome. So for any of our new members, if you're not sure about Coraggio, talk to Scotty. But you run a pretty big team, Scott. So you'd be doing lots of Teams and Zooms. And how's that all going?
No, very good. We're doing something similar. So with my team, 8 o'clock every morning, we do a huddle. And that goes through what happened yesterday afternoon, what happened and what's going to happen today, the plan for today. So instead of having the guys sitting outside my office, we do that. During the day, instead of making phone calls or sending emails, if there's something that we would normally discuss as a group, then I'd normally walk outside and talk to people. I'll call them up on Teams. My team has taught me how to make a Teams call.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah.
Which has taken a few goes. So we'll do those. So, for example, yesterday I bounced in on them twice in the afternoon. So instead of making a phone call or emailing backwards and forwards, we're having that. We're having the same discussion that we would have in person, but over Teams. And then every Monday we have a morning tea with the team. So there's 9 of us, and from 10:30 it goes for about an hour. Well, when I started it was about half an hour, but now it takes about an hour and a half. And we go around the team and we discuss. We don't discuss work at all for that hour and a half, for that morning tea, if you like. We get a cup of coffee and we basically have a Teams call and have a chat. What did you do on the weekend? Some of them are doing baking, some of them are doing art and crafts. A couple of them are homeschooling rather, and we talk about that. Sometimes the kids come into the room and we ask them to come in and they show us their favourite car. They show us if their colouring in that they did yesterday at school, or what they're doing. They come in and have a chat, and as you can imagine, 4 and 5 and 6 year olds are normally quite shy initially, but now we've been doing it every week, and now there's a couple of them that just walk in and say hi everyone and start talking over the top of their mother or their father. So it's really good, and like I said, in that hour and a half we might spend 30 seconds or a minute on talking work, but the rest of it's just home life, personal life, and what's going on. We had, I'll share with everybody, I saw the importance of it after about the 3rd week, where one of the team members was struggling at home and her resilience was down, I guess. Her husband was getting called into work on the weekend. She was home on her own. She was doing a lot of online shopping and that sort of thing, and she was feeling lonely. So a couple of the other team members started making contact with her and picked her up and made sure that she was okay during the week, at other times during the week. And now the whole team's rocking and rolling, to be honest with you. They're getting longer and longer because they want to keep talking. And then, at 11 o'clock, 11:05, one of the ladies gives us an update on Gladys's press conference, where we're at, what the numbers are, and it's been really good. And the feedback coming back from the team's been it's been really beneficial. They feel much better. They feel much more connected with the team, and they're going quite well.
Thanks, Mr. Brian. That was really good.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Scott.
I was going to go to one of our members. Is it Ildy? Ildy is still on screen somewhere.
Yes.
I know you had your hand up a moment ago there.
I'm here.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello. Well, I wanted to add a thought to Michelle's. She mentioned weaknesses and weaknesses and resilience. And I think there's a really important thought there, because the more you are aware of your weaknesses, the more you can actually become resilient, because knowing them and working on them actually is the road to become resilient. Or at least that's what I believe in. And I think we don't spend enough time in that space of understanding what, why, and how can we move out of those weaknesses, and what can we do in order to become resilient. I mean, I'm coming from a country where resilience was kind of second nature to us because we had no choice. I was born in Transylvania, so I grew up in a communist regime. Resilience was just something that was built in us, I guess, from birth. But it definitely makes you think a little bit different and reevaluate the way that you do things right now. And if someone says that has not been affected by these lockdowns, then that's probably not true, because even those people who love being in their bubbles and not talking to anyone, just be productive and get things done, are still hitting their ends. And I, as a time management specialist, I meet a lot of people, and one of the things that I see now is that people struggle not having that personal connection with other people. So I guess that's the biggest challenge at the moment from the perspective of resilience. How do you learn to trust that personal connection again? And it's not just the craving of meeting others, but I already see that some people are afraid of getting out of their bubble and meeting the world again, and getting out there and living again. So we're going to see a whole different angle of this question, resilience, in the near future.
Thanks, Ilvi.
My pleasure.
Hi, Richard, it's Michelle. I'm not going to start my video because I'm on my mobile phone, but I just wanted to chime in if I could.
Absolutely. Hi, Michelle LaForest.
Hello, and thank you to Cameron and Michelle, who I've not met, unfortunately, but Michelle, great name and even great initials. So fantastic to see. Thank you for those sensational presentations, and a couple of things that have just come to my mind through some of the questions and so on. Look, the first thing in terms of resilience or working with people and collaborating, Cameron, I actually got them to work harder. So I said, let's do a major project. We've got this time in lockdown, and we did a big digital transformation in the business that I run when I'm not chairing Coraggio boards. And I think that was actually fantastic to have that focus, that positivity. What can we get done? And rather than focusing on the negative. So that worked really well. I also felt there was a really tough time for people that did homeschooling, and I think that was probably one of the hardest things for anyone in my team. So we had some sort of caregiving around that. We also had the those original quarantini and drinks and things that people have mentioned, and I think that was great. And just a complete surprise care pack, which people really appreciated. But to the point, most recently, I don't know if anyone's seen an article, and it was in the New York Times. I think the guy's name is Adam Scott, and I spoke with my boards about this the other week. And it's about the point where we're at now. And I think, again, in terms of resilience and the discussion about grit, we touched upon this in a sense that it is eternal at the moment for people or those of us who are in lockdown. It's not just a moment of resilience, it's relentless. And what this speaks to is the spectrum of mental health for people. So I say at one end, people are flourishing, at the other end, there's a depression, but there's a place in between which is called languishing. And it's kind of like just being average, just flowing along. And a lot of people and a lot of team members, and even when we spoke in board, said, oh, that's where I'm at. And it made them feel really good to actually have a name, have a word for how they're feeling, just as we hopefully are getting towards the end of lockdown. It doesn't mean that they're not performing or that they're not resilient or they don't have grit. It's just that things are maybe not operating for them at the same pace. So I just thought it might be interesting to mention that, and other people may relate to that, or they may be able to, put a name to that for one of their team. I know I did that for one of mine. She went, oh, that's great. She was going to take personally. She goes, oh, no, I know what's wrong now with me and I'll be fine. And thank you. So just an idea around that.
Thanks, Michelle. Does the other Michelle have a response?
Richard, if I can cut in for a second.
Sure.
Unfortunately, unlike Campbell, I've got to go to the dentist, which is not something I'm looking forward to for some special treatment. But but to Campbell's clear and cogent presentation, if I could add 2 more C's to the list, one of the reflections I had is the fact that what is going to be the knock-on effect of COVID and what it's done to us. And one of the things that is now coming up in the literature, certainly from overseas, as evidenced by a study done by Microsoft, is that 40% of the global workforce is now considering leaving their employers. And they're calling this the Great Resignation that's in progress. It started in the United States and other places. And what they're saying is the movement is so significant that we haven't seen anything like this in terms of behavioural change in living memory. And I can share the article to you. It was something the ABC Radio National did, and I've got an article that's been translated from that. But I thought that was fascinating, and that is that people have in that lockdown mode have taken the time, or from the damage done for it, to reconsider what's important in life, and more particularly how their job and their employment actually fits into that, and are making some very serious decisions about either leaving or changing jobs. And more importantly to that, I guess, is the fact that we therefore need to be excellent employers, to what Campbell was talking about. Otherwise, you're going to be victim of this exodus. It is absolutely gobsmacking to think that number of people are actively considering, what their future is in terms of their place of employment. So, business owners, beware, because it's coming to a place in Australia near us very shortly, it seems.
Thank you, Donovan, and we wish you all the very best with your dentist appointment this afternoon.
All right, so I'll leave that bombshell with you, Richard.
Thanks, Donovan.
Okay.
Michelle, just going over to you. We've lost her. Have we lost her? No, I was going over to Michelle Lagarde after Michelle LaForest's comment. Sorry, Michelle. I've got two Michelles on screen. My apologies.
Oh, sorry. What was the question?
I was just asking you for a response to Michelle LaForest's comment that she made earlier.
Yes, I think it's great to obviously motivate and keep your teams busy. She makes a good point about, that sense of community is what we talked about. But I think more interesting, also as interesting, was Donovan's comment, this big migration about people assessing and evaluating their life and saying, is this really for me? Is this the trajectory I want? And like really questioning what's important to them and how they want to spend every day you have is a day lost. Someone reminded me turning 51 that I've had more birthdays than I'm likely to have or want to have moving forward. It's pretty depressing. So all thinking about what Donovan's saying and this big migration about people just throwing their jobs in and finding kind of a catharsis or a light bulb moment. And I think that's really interesting. Another post-COVID, or when I say post-COVID, but pulling on Michelle's thread, Donovan's thread, I think, Richard, the comment that John Sweet Kelly made in David O'Brien's grit session last week about illness, sickness, annual leave, borders open, we're moving into Christmas between, Melbourne Cup and Australia Day, where people typically take annual leave anyway, but they're saying the rates of, illness and unwell and sickness is just going to escalate, and how are we going to manage with that? I'm not sure there's been that much discussion, and Donovan mentioned this, which made me think about this, about, what's the fallout of COVID. And I don't, everyone's talking about it because we're in it now, but what is the fallout? And I think Donovan makes a point about employment. I mean, Michelle made a great point, but John Sweet Kelly made a great point last Friday, didn't he?
Everybody.
Richard, may I comment, please?
Please, Kevin.
So, from all I'm watching and reading, Michelle, and to Michelle LaForest's comments, I think the challenge with this stat that Donovan quoted, 41% or 40%, I think the onus upon us is to rethink and reimagine how you want your business to be and how you want to see it and how you want it to run. And that can only happen, I think, in open discussion with your staff. And that open discussion will be primarily about you, the proprietor in business, of making a decision. It's your company, it's your decision. You may share it with the board, you may share it with the staff, but at the end of the day, the proprietor is making the decision. And that decision is about, do you really need your office anymore, or do you need a smaller one or a bigger one? The decision about you seriously want your staff to come to the office. And for the older groups around this table today, we all want to go to the office and we all want to see our staff in the office. However, for the last 18 months, our staff have had a change of mindset because they've seen a change in mindset of how the community works, how the business community works. So I think it's a tough one. And I think that the only way that we in Coragio can prepare ourselves is to actually do that. You must look inside and decide what you want from your business. So supposedly New South Wales is back out of lockdown in mid-October, and Victoria will follow, I'm sure, and Queensland's just living the life, and so I think for all of us we have to rethink with our partners, with our shareholders, with our board, and with our staff. What do we want from our business, and how do we want it to operate for the future? Because if we don't give opportunity to our staff when we know that we can give opportunity, only when we know that, then they could, fall into that 40% category. And so I think you've got to get in. I've always said to all our staff, no matter what the news, particularly bad news, get in first, deliver the bad news first, and then deal with it rather than wait and let it stew. And so I think, Richard, that our goal and our chair's goals should be to support our CAB members in that decision-making process about how they deal with their own desires and then their staff's planning with that.
Very true, very true. Are there any closing comments from anybody that anybody would
The
like?
only thing, not a closing comment, but I'll dovetail a little bit into what Kevin was talking about and the topic that Donovan broached. I look at that 40% not as something as daunting, like, holy hell, I'm going to be losing 40% of my workforce. I look at it as an opportunity, because fundamentally, we can't, we can influence behaviors, but we don't control behaviors. All right. So we as employers, as leaders, we need to make sure that we are creating an incredible place where people want, a credible culture where people want to engage with. And that's a lot of the 7 C's and all these other things and previous things. So if we recognize that it's around that culture piece, like if somebody's heart isn't in it, let them go be successful someplace else. You should always be on the front foot with the war for talent and always being recruiting. I don't know if anybody's been recruiting over the past 12, 18 months. I'm probably going to get some nods. It hasn't been easy, because trying to unwedge somebody that's too scared to move in a pandemic for something that's even a better opportunity. Like, I think now is the time that as employers, we should be going to the market, be thinking about what can you do, and just kind of flip that, let your competitors buy into doom and gloom, but you should be embracing the fact that, hey, there could be some excellent talent on the market that we may not have had an insight into. So go get it. So anyway, that was my cheerleading speech.
That's why, Wendy, your resilient level was right up there. Because I agree with you. I actually see it as an opportunity. And from time to time, we've probably got about 10 people here in our office that normally holds about 250. And when somebody comes in that's not usually here, it's usually a conversation around what are you doing here and why are you here. So we see the opportunity in new ways of working, I guess. And from a productivity point of view, in some areas we've seen it certainly stay the same, but in most cases it's increased, and people are happier. They're not traveling, they're not sitting in the freeway, they're not paying tolls, they're not trying to find parking, and they're finding that their cost of living is it's a lot cheaper to stay at home than it is to come to work. Is probably what I'm trying to say. And with our huddles and our communication and staying in touch with people, we're finding that a lot of people, at least in our team, are quite happy, and it's certainly an opportunity. more so than more so than not an opportunity, more so than a risk. So, yeah.
Just touching on that point, Scott, and I'm going to, Ildy's sitting there, but when we had a board meeting last month, Ildy brought up a really interesting point, which sort of revolves around this. And we've all heard about the work-life balance. And, our employees and ourselves, I suppose, want that work-life balance. Well, Ildy pointed out that that's changing. It's actually moving towards a life-work balance now. And I think that's really important moving forward when we're dealing with our staff and our people, that we need to accept the fact that we've been through this really tough time. And as you said, Scott, people have reassessed where they're at and so forth. And we need to think about that life-work balance for them now and ourselves. And that might impact on how we structure our business and how we set up the working groups, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it's an interesting one.
And what we've seen is, and someone mentioned it before, we've worked out what we can do. Like the beginning, early last year, March, April, everyone was skeptical about productivity rates and people working from home, and then they weren't going to be sitting outside our office, and we weren't going to be able to see what they're doing every day. The fact is, you don't know what they're doing every day anyway. So I have a couple of views on that. You don't know what they're doing on their phone. You don't know what they've got on their screen before you walk past and they close it, or they change it, or they flick to a different tab. You don't know how much they're on Facebook or Instagram, and you don't know. And then the other side of the coin is, if you don't trust the guy working beside you, you're not going to trust them working at home. And if you don't trust them to work at home, then why have you got them in the organisation in the first place? So if you mix all that around, work-life balance. If I'm on a huddle call or that morning tea that I talked about before, and we've got parents that are homeschooling. Now, obviously, the kids don't realise that mum's working, 8 hours a day or from 9 to 5 or whatever it is, and we encourage them to interrupt. We encourage them to stop doing what they're doing and look after the child, whatever it is. He's either got a problem with his maths, or his iPad's frozen, or we've got to get on the Zoom call with the school. And when I'm talking school, we're talking preschools as well. They need to look after the kids, and what we're finding is they're getting their work done regardless. Now that may mean that they might do it at 9 o'clock at night after they go to bed, or they. I've got one of my girls that works Monday to Wednesday, but she might dial in on a Thursday, and she'll clean up some things that she didn't do the day before because he had trouble with his maths, or he had trouble with his Zoom call, and you get it. We're finding we get it back tenfold, and that's going to change going forward. And like I think Kevin said, we've worked out what we can do, and everybody knows that now.
Thank you, Scotty. Are there any closing comments by anybody? No, we're all good. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to Michelle Vagana and Campbell